looking at the Afghan situation, we also have to look at Afghanistan's history. Afghanistan's history has been riddled with conflict and turbulence ever since Russians invaded Afghanistan back in the 80s and 90s. The U.S., in response to the Russians, we've supplied weapons and supplied military aid so that Afghanistan could help and try to fight the Russians. You have to look at this series of conflicts. These conflicts led to a series of civil wars. The Kabul fell to the Taliban, who is a hardline terror group back in 1996, which then they gained power, which allowed them to create the September 11th terrorist attacks on New York City. The U.S. then, along with a coalition of other nations, went to war in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other countries in the Middle East. They have since toppled the Taliban for sheltering Osama bin Laden. After this victory, a process of Afghanistan's political reconstruction was established, including adoption of a new constitution and a presidential election in 2004, and legislative elections back in 2005. The U.S., it seems so far, has established the Afghanistan government pretty well. They seem to be doing pretty well on their own. They recently had a re-election back in 2009, and the president was re-elected for another 5-year term. This president was Hamid Karzai. He was the first democratically elected president in Afghanistan. Despite these gains towards stability, though, continued violence from terrorist groups remains a serious challenge in Afghanistan. This serious challenge, as we stated before, is because that the Taliban continues to recruit those individuals in Afghanistan who are angry at the U.S. being here. A lot of the reason as to why they're angry is because there's high civilian casualties. These high civilian casualties are oftentimes blamed not on the Taliban who caused them, but upon the U.S. being there. The Taliban recruits these individuals who are angry at, their brother or their daughter or their son or somebody like that being killed. That's how they continue to feed their terror groups. And the U.S. is supposedly trying to be seen as a savior, someone who goes in there and they're trying to rebuild the government and get the Afghani forces strong enough to be on their own. But people are continuing to die. And a lot of that, as I said, is being put on the U.S. forces, and it's being blamed as their fault, and therefore the Afghanis are turning towards the Taliban to try and repel the U.S. Financial costs as well was another big issue that was talked about. Financial cost in Afghanistan has sharply been increased over the last few years. The most expensive year during the Bush presidency was the fiscal year of 2008 with a price tag of $43 billion. In the fiscal year of 2009, that number quickly rose to $59.9 billion. In the fiscal year of 2010, the war was costing the U.S. $93.8 billion, and a cost that was projected to be $118.6 billion for the fiscal year of 2012 and $113.7 billion for the fiscal year of 2012. This was found by What is the Price of War, the Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Cost of Conflict from Anthony Gregory, who is from the Independent Institute. These continued costs are only going to raise as long as our troops are there, because we're going to have to fund these F-35 jets that cost $120 million. As Niall stated, without funding a war is a lot more expensive than funding relief.
I gotta cut you off. It's over 5 minutes now.
Okay.